Good morning. I'm Rodney Dickerson, the town manager for the town of Garner. Welcome to our 11th annual Veterans Memorial Day celebration. Before I get started with the formal program, I'd like to take a moment of privilege. Typically, we would have our Miss Garner pageant family here with us this morning, lighting up the room with their brightness. However, last night, if you heard, there was a vehicle crash that was announced on the news this morning, and one of the pageant participants was involved in that with her family. Haley Wagner, Miss Garner, outstanding teen, was involved in the crash. There were 5 injured, and she also lost her grandmother in that accident. And there's one other on life support. So prior to getting our program started, we just want to extend a moment of silence and prayer, special prayer for that family and our Garner, Miss Garner team as she, tries to cope with this tragic loss. So if you would bow your heads, please. Thank you. I want to thank Charles Scott, Major General of the U.S. Army, retired, for his service to our country, the town of Garner, and his continued effort to keep this event going. I am honored again to serve as your MC. We come together as a community to honor those that have stood in the face of danger, sacrificed their personal desires, carried out orders to the best of their abilities, so that we may gather publicly, so that we may speak without fear, so that we can express ourselves in ways no other country can. In essence, so we can live in a land that is free. The sacrifices do not stop here. They also travel the world and mobilize to defend other countries so that they may emulate the privileges we enjoy and often take for granted. The inscription on the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. puts it best. Our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met. Because of their service, today we honor the millions of veterans around the world, and more specifically, those that are a part of the Garner community. So thank you for being here with us this morning. If you are able to stand, please stand and remain standing for the invocation by Dr. Jeffrey D. Scholler, lead pastor, Aversboro Road Baptist Church. That will be followed by the presentation and posting of the colors by the Garner Police and Garner Fire Department, their honor guard, and the national anthem by the Garner Magnet High School Wind Ensemble. Please stand. As you have been welcomed, I also welcome you to Aversboro Road Baptist Church, and thank you for being here for this worship service and this memorial today. Will you bow with me? Father, as we gather here in this place, we come to acknowledge and we come to give thanks for the men and women who have answered the call to serving this country. We thank you for their dedication. We thank you, God, for the sacrifices that they have made so that we might experience the freedoms that we have been given. But Lord, as we gather in this sanctuary, it's my prayer that your love will fill this place and that we will gather in the name above all names, the name of Jesus, who sacrificially gave his life for us. Lord, it was him who taught us what it meant to love and to serve. And so, Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be in this place. And we ask in his name that you would join us. God, that your presence be with us, that you would lead, guide, and direct us as we celebrate this day, as we remember this day, as we give thanks this day
for men and women who have answered the call to serve and who have made sacrifices for us. We ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Next, we will have special remarks on behalf of the Garner Town Council by Mayor Pro Tem Ken Marshburn.
Good morning to you all. First of all, before I make any formal remarks, I'd like to recognize some special people here today. It will be mainly townspeople, and Rodney will recognize others at a later time. I'd like to recognize seated here at the front Miss Kathy Behringer, Town Council Member. If you'd stand, please. Seated beside her is Mr. Elmo Vance. Mr. Vance. I believe Mr. Gray Singleton is here. Great, good to see you. Thank you. We also have present with us this morning Mr. Damian Dellinger, Council Member-elect. Damian, where are you? Way in the back. Thank you, Damian. Is Mr. Phil Matthews here? Okay. So, and then I'm going to take just a special privilege to give a shout out to some friends that I've come to know in recent days and months. These are folks who are from the Able to Serve program. They're seated to my right in the rear back over here. Give us a wave, guys. Thank you for being here today. They brought 2 busloads of people here. Thank you. Very much. On behalf of the Mayor's Office and the town of Garner, I want to thank all who were involved in making sure that we celebrate Veterans Day every year. It has been my great privilege to attend this annual event as one way to recognize and honor our heroes and veterans. A quote by Joseph Campbell states, quote, "A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself." And so to all of our veterans, we say thank you for giving to the greater cause of freedom. May you experience not only today, but every day, the honor and gratitude that is worthy of your sacrifice. I believe I speak for all the citizens of our great town when I say, we salute you. May God bless you and your families with his grace and mercy, both now and always. Thank you.
Several other community elected officials here with us today, so we'd like to recognize them. State Representative Julie Von Heffen. Thank you for being with us. And then we also have the Chair of the Wake County Board of Education, Monica Johnson Hostler. And if I have missed any other elected officials, please stand and be recognized. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance today in support of our veterans. All right. Inside your program shows the 5 branches of the military, U.S. military. You do not need to research long on the internet to understand that these branches have a shared goal, but carry out their missions in different ways. The service branches of the military, from most junior to senior, include the U.S. Coast Guard, is a military organization within the Department of Homeland Security whose mission is to safeguard our nation's maritime interests and environments around the world. The mission of the United States Air Force is to fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace. To achieve that mission, the Air Force has a vision of global vigilance, reach, and power. The mission of the United States Navy is to maintain, train, and equip combat-ready naval forces capable of winning wars, deterring aggression, and maintaining freedom of the seas. The Marine Corps serves as the aggressive tip of the U.S. military spear. With a reputation for prowess in combat, it is smaller, more dynamic force than any other in the American arsenal, and the only forward deployed force designed for expeditionary operations by air, land, and sea. The Army's mission is to fight and win our nation's war by providing prompt, sustained land dominance across a full range of military operations and spectrum of conflict in support of combatant commanders. So now at this time, we want to honor our nation's veterans. First, will veterans of World War II, known as the Greatest Generation, please stand. We are definitely honored to be in your presence here today. I understand that we may also have in our presence very special guests. Anyone who has served 3 wars, please stand. And I believe that's World War II, Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Is that, got that right? Thanks. All right. What a special service you have done for this country. Now, veterans of all U.S. military services, please join these World War II vets as we call out your military branch. Veteran Army soldiers. Marines. Navy sailors. Air Force airmen. Coast Guard guardsmen. We also want to recognize our reserve forces, veterans of each service, and veterans of the Army and Air National Guards. So we thank them for their service, for continued service. So let's show our appreciation once again for all of these branches of the military and these veterans that have served us so proudly. Next, we will have a presentation by the Aversboro Elementary School Choir, directed by Christy Root, here for a musical salute to veterans.
Fills me with
That was outstanding. Let's give another round of applause for these young people. Thank you so much for being with us on a day where you could have been out playing or playing video games or doing other things. So we really appreciate you being with here today. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for today. It is Cindy Parsons. In 2004, Cindy's son Shane entered the United States Army and served honorably in a decorated infantry brigade. In 2006, he was critically injured in Iraq. After Shane returned home for treatment, Cindy became his caretaker and a strong advocate for wounded service members. She participated in the Wounded Warrior Project Caregiver Summit in Washington, D.C. in 2009. While there, she lobbied Congress for the passage of the Caregiver and Veterans Omnibus Health Service Act of 2010, a bill providing assistance and support for caregivers of injured servicemen and women returning from war. Cindy previously served on the board of the Brain Injury Association of Ohio, and both she and Shane have participated in speaking events to educate others on traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder across the country. Because of her experiences, Cindy is passionate about promoting public awareness of our injured warriors returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. Please welcome Cindy Parsons to the stage.
Good morning. The greatest lesson that I ever learned is when a series of events that happens in a person's life test you. It tests who you are, your morals, your character, how you were brought up, your culture. Because sometimes life can get brutal and you become bitter because of that. I know this well because I had no idea that my own child, my son, my only son, would teach me the word resiliency and what it meant to be courageous. Maybe it was the time that I was in high school and my father was severely burned, 75% of his body, third-degree burns as he tried to light an old furnace back in the 70s. And he ended up dying 5 days later because of pneumonia. And I was a young girl ready to graduate, the oldest of 4 children. And I vowed to my father that someday I would become a nurse and not treat my patients the way I saw my father treated. And he also gave me words that I held on to today. You see, he was a United States Army veteran, and then he also served in the National Guard. And before he passed, he looked at me and he said, "Cindy, you need to be strong. Be strong." And those words emulated all of my life. Maybe it was the time that my husband, the love of my life, ended up with a brain tumor, and it was cancer. And we wanted children, and it didn't happen. But I got pregnant 1 month before he started chemotherapy, and we had a little boy, and we named him Shane. Before my husband passed away, I vowed to my husband that I would be the best mom that I could ever be because the prognosis was not good. And we knew he was going to leave this earth. But I made a vow to him and said that I would raise our son to be productive, happy, and do something good in his life. And my husband passed away when Shane was 6 months old. Life can be brutal. And I remember Dad's words, "Be strong, Cindy, be strong." Then, as Americans, life never was the same after 9/11. Where were you on 9/11? I know where I was. I went back to school to become a nurse, and my son at that time was a junior in high school. And I'll never forget that day, because that changed everything for us. Yes, we were a military family, we were raised that way, but when we saw those Twin Towers fall, And I saw my son pacing back and forth in front of the TV as we watched the Twin Towers fall. And we saw people falling out of the buildings. And the most poignant part of all that, we saw the first responders running towards the devastation. They didn't run away, they ran towards it. It changed us. It changed my son that day. I get emotional, so bear with me. He looked at me and he said, "Mom, how dare they come onto our country and attack innocent people? I can't stand here and do nothing. I can't do that, Mom. I'm going to join the service. I want to do something to protect our country so this will never happen again." And I said, "Wait a minute, you have to finish school first, son. You must finish school." I thought he would change his mind, but he didn't. When he graduated from high school in 2005, 1 month from graduation, he left for Fort Benning, Georgia, to join the United States Army for his boot camp. Anybody here go to Fort Benning? Fort Benning? Yes, sir. He followed in my father's footsteps as well. At that time in 2004, we were fully engulfed in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I remember watching the TV, and on the bottom, how many wounded, how many killed every single day. And as a single mom, I was terrified. I was terrified. At that time, I finished my nursing school. I worked 2 nursing jobs just to keep my mind busy. It was tough. And then I got the phone call no mother ever wants to get. The phone call that told me my son had been critically wounded in Iraq. For you see, that day, he volunteered on a mission to prevent anti-coalitions from attacking our troops in Ramadi, Iraq. It was his day off. It was his day off. And he volunteered to take one of his brother's place. Because isn't that what a brother does, right? You help each other in the time of need. So he stood up and said, "You stay back, brother. I've got this mission for you. Rest up. Get your head straight." As he drove that lead Humvee, they were waiting. They pulled a mission to look for some caches or some weapons from our enemy, and as they were coming back, they were waiting. And they detonated what they call an IED, improvised explosive device. But wait a minute. If Shane was here today, he'll say, "No, Mom, that's not what it was. It was more powerful." It was called an EFP, an improvised explosive form penetrator, excuse me. And this was meant to take a tank out. Can you imagine the devastation of this weapon, this bomb, inside a small Humvee? It immediately went through the door, and it severed my son's left leg above the knee. It severed his right leg. The gunner seated at the right lost his left leg and had facial and arm damage on his left side. And they were fired upon, so they could not get to him immediately. So my son bled out, and he died in the Humvee. And the last thing he remembered was watching his buddy pull his leg over, move it aside, and start returning fire to save their lives. That's all he remembered. And luckily, we have the most amazing medical nurses and doctors in the military, and medics and Navy corpsmen and all of them above, because they saved his life, not once but twice. They saved him. And it was a miracle. But they had to amputate the right leg just to save his life. He was 21 years old. When I got the call, I thought, how will I ever tell him he'll never dance again with me because he loved to dance? How will I tell him that nothing will ever be the same? But I remember Dad's words, United States Army soldier. Cindy, be strong. Remember those words. Be strong at the time of trauma, or at the time that you think that your life is just going so badly. Be strong. think of this story. So I gathered myself up. I left my career at that time as a registered nurse working in an emergency room. I knew the devastation. I knew the ramifications of this injury, and it wouldn't be good. I ended up flying to Landstuhl, Germany, where we bring our wounded back from Iraq to make sure they're stabilized before they bring them back to stateside. So as I enter that room in Landstuhl, Germany, Army Medical Center, I had to muster up all the strength to walk in there and see my son. And I vowed I would not cry in front of him because I know as a nurse he could hear me. He may not be able to see me, but I know he could hear me. And when I walked into that room, I saw my strong, handsome son, swollen beyond recognition with every type of equipment to maintain life. And I saw the blanket flat. I'm a nurse. I assess a patient from head to toe. I couldn't lift that blanket up. I just couldn't do it. But the hardest part to see a tube protruding from his brain. Didn't cry. I went up to him and I said, "Shane, you fight. Don't you die, because I know you can do this." And I'd like to say he finally listened to his mama. So listen to your mom and dad. Listen, listen, listen. He heard me, and fight he did. Even from the moment when they tried to transport him from Landstuhl to get him on the CCAT team, the critical aeronomic Air Force team that came in to bring him through, he was so unstable they had to scrap the mission because the pressure from that tube in the brain started to shoot up. And when that pressure shot up, that meant that his brain was swollen so bad that it was compact syndrome, that they would have had to cut his skull open. They didn't want that to happen. So they scrapped it. And they waited 5 days later, and off we go to Ramstein Air Force Base to transport my son back to Andrews Air Force Base to get to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And guess what? As a mama bear, I said, "I'm not leaving my son's side. I refuse." They said, "Yes, ma'am, you will sit on a jump seat next to your son on the C-130." And what I saw was truly amazing. We had warriors stacked 3 high. It was so difficult to see. Wounded. Shane was one of the 3 most difficult patients on that flight. But they worked so hard, and they got back to Andrews Air Force Base, and we land, and that door flies open, and up comes the Red Cross bus. And my son was the first one off with myself, off to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., where I did not see my son for more than 14 hours. You see, the soil in Iraq is contaminated with a bacteria called Acetobacter. So there were so many infections. And so they had to not only contain him, but they had to make sure the infections were taken care of, because there was fevers. And of course, they had to put him in a coma, a barbiturate coma, to bring him home, just to stabilize him, to bring him home. And we didn't know what would happen when he would wake up. And I thought, would he ever remember me? Would he know who I am? Maybe it was a blessing that he didn't remember. I didn't know what to think, but I just prayed. I said, prayed to God, "Please give me a sign." And I remember seeing a beautiful rainbow, and I realized that was my sign, that my son was going to be okay, and we held on to that hope. Hope is everything, hope. But while we were at Walter Reed, we had some visitors. We had many visitors, amazing, amazing people, so dedicated to our warriors and their families. But 2 particular gentlemen came up to Shane, and it was Wounded Warrior Project. And they said, "We're here to help you and your son if there's anything you need." And we didn't know the ramification of that day, how the mission to honor and empower wounded warriors, and a vision to foster the most successful generation in the history of any war, with programs and services to help them transition from military life to the civilian world. Because let's face it, many of you in this room know exactly what I'm saying. You can't turn that switch off. It doesn't turn on and off. It doesn't. It's hard. They gave us a voice, though. They told us, "Tell us what you need, and we will fight." And together we fight, still today. This is so hard. I'm so sorry because I look out in the audience and I see our veterans, and you are amazing, and we are so dedicated to your sacrifice. Thank you so much. But we also have to remember that today marks the 100th year since President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed Armistice Day. Armistice Day is what is known today as Veterans Day. It's 1 year after the anniversary of when World War I ended. So on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we honor and never forget those who sacrificed so much for our country, for us to be here, for us to be free citizens, to say and do as we wish. A day that Americans need to pause and reflect, to honor and give gratitude to each and every one of our veterans and their families and their caregivers who serve our country and continue today. It's because of you men and women who serve that allow us to be who we are today. And for that beautiful flag, and every time the wind blows it, the sacrifices of the blood that was spilled on that flag, as Americans as we know. My son went on. He came home finally. It was months. He had 3 different medical facilities that he had to endure and go through, not only days, not only weeks, but months and years of rehabilitation. It was very tough. He went from Walter Reed Army Medical Center to the VA in Minneapolis for traumatic brain injury rehab, and then we ended up at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas at Fort Sam, where he remained there for almost a year. All throughout that time, working very hard to try to regain what he had lost. He lost a lot. His diagnosis, a severe anoxic traumatic brain injury, invisible wound of war. Above knee bilateral amputee, post-traumatic stress disorder, invisible wound of war. So the fight wasn't going to be that he lost his legs. It was going to be the brain and the memory and to move forward with his life. Now, it's been rough. It hasn't been easy. He lost the ability to read and write. He has short-term, long-term memory losses, cognitive deficits, meaning he'll never learn the same. He forgets all the time. Imagine going to the restaurant of your choice and you pick up a menu and you can't even read it because it looks like just mumble jumbo to you. He was embarrassed. To this day, he's embarrassed about that. And we tell him there's nothing to be embarrassed for. You have sacrificed so much. And when he did finally come home, I got scared because all he wanted to do was lock himself in a room and play video games and not go out. And I got deeply, deeply concerned. And that's when Wounded Warrior Project came forward and they started a program called the Independence Program to help those that are severely wounded, that have maybe a neurological injury, a spinal injury, or that requires a caregiver 24/7. You see, that's what I was. I was a caregiver for 24/7 for my son and for his safety. And what they did was amazing. My son realized that it was a choice. You can become bitter or you get better. And as he saw, they made a goal. And his goal, he wanted to become a football coach because he loved football in high school. And they did it. They worked with him. They came in the home and worked with, they actually hired somebody that was in a community college. He came in and he helped Shane attain certification, and he coached our junior high Catholic school, 4th and 5th grade, where they won 4 games, lost 5, but the most important part about all that is at the end of each game, they would all, the players, the cheerleaders, the coaches would all come over and touch Shane, and they would say a prayer, whether they won or lost. And the tears started streaming down Shane's face because he realized he was accepted. He overcame that adversity and he's accepted, and he had a goal and he had purpose in his life. And that snowballed into more. He coached his high school alma mater as an assistant defensive coach. He went on to help with the all first wounded veteran sled hockey team. Yeah, he sits in a sled and plays hockey, just like the stand-up, same rules in Columbus, Ohio. Look him up, Ohio Warriors. And he hand cycled for 3 days, just using his hands with the Soldier Ride with the Wounded Warrior Project. He went on to ski in Aspen, downhill ski. I couldn't watch. I thought he was going to kill himself because he was so fast. And he even talked Mama into jumping out of a perfectly good plane because he wanted to see if he could parachute again. I thought I was going to die, but it was the most beautiful thing to see my son's face when I landed, and the big smile. He said, "I knew you could do it, Mom. I knew you could." He's gone on to do so many amazing things. He hunts, he fishes. He got a 4-point buck sitting in his wheelchair with a bow. And he continues to help other veterans in his community, telling, because he said at one point, "Mom, why didn't I die out there? I should have just died. I can't live this way." And I go, "Yes, you have a reason. You're here for a reason. And you have to figure that out because only God and you know what that is." And he finally, after all these years, came to me and he says, "I know what that reason is now. To show others that you never give up. Never." He taught me the word resilience and courage. And today he still teaches me, my only son. I apologize for being so, but today is very emotional. It's a very emotional day. Something amazing has happened with Shane. He never gave up. He enjoys all sports. He tries everything just in a different way. And no, he doesn't use prosthetics because the higher the amputee, it's more difficult for them to walk. So he uses a manual wheelchair. There was many programs that he's participated throughout the United States with Wounded Warrior Project, but there was one most in particular that was truly amazing because his girlfriend left him. She left him. And he thought nobody would love him the way he is. Well, guess what? Outside Pittsburgh, we had a family event, and we brought in many warriors and their families, and he met a young lady. Her name is Jennifer. She's a teacher. She was there to nanny her sister and brother-in-law, who were both military police in Iraq and were wounded. And they sparked an eye with each other, and they had a long-distance relationship. And 3 years ago, they got married. They got married. Yes, thank you. They got married. But we made sure that Jennifer knew that there was nothing easy about this marriage, and she was all in for it because they fell in love. Not because he couldn't drive or that he couldn't read or write or he had no legs. They fell deeply in love. And one more thing, guess what? I became grandma 15 months ago. They had a little boy, yes. If Shane wheeled in here today, and he wheeled in here, and he sat right in front of you all, and you would ask him, "Shane, would you do it again? Would you go back and serve your country? Would you go back to war knowing what you've been through?" Guess what he would tell you? "Yes, I would, for the love of my country, my family, and my friends." And it reminds me of what President Reagan once said. "Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We did not pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for and protected for them to do the same." Strong words for Americans, strong words. We stand united as Americans. We must help each other, and we must help and continue to help our veterans. You young ladies and gentlemen behind us and in front of us, never forget your soldiers, your warriors, and their families and their caregivers. Never forget them. Ask them if they need help, but more importantly, tell them thank you. Give them gratitude and thank you for what you've done for our country. Never forget. Wounded Warrior Project still stands today committed to make an impact on those returning back from war after 9/11. Whether they've been injured stateside or overseas, we stand committed to make sure that we find those programs and services to help them. Recently, there was the largest survey that Wounded Warrior Project has implemented for any veterans service organization. Over 39,000 participated, and guess what they found out the most difficult part of their injury is? The invisible wounds of war, PTSD, and suicide. We stand committed with Warrior Care Network to continue that fight today. Warrior Care Network will help those warriors returning back on an outpatient basis. We academically, 4 academic medical centers that we partner with to help them free of cost. So remember that. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to honor each and one of our veterans in the audience. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we will never forget your sacrifice. One more thing. Shane will tell you, I'll never have to clip my toenails and I'll never have stinky feet again. If that isn't resiliency and courage, I don't know what is. The greatest lesson I ever learned is when a series of events that happens in a person's life test you. It tests who you are, your morals, your character, your strength. And you realize life can be brutal, but it is a choice. It is a choice. You either become bitter or you get better. Let's get better as a nation. God bless America. Thank you very much, Garner, and this beautiful event. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Parsons, we sincerely thank you for that story that began with service and bravery and then went to suffering and pain and then ended with strength and resilience. And you took that strength and resilience and used it to serve once again. You and Shane came full circle with your service, and we appreciate that. You've certainly inspired us and opened our eyes to the extreme sacrifices that wounded warriors have made. Hopefully, we all better understand their hardships and the struggles of their caregivers. You have truly been strong. Your father would truly be proud of you. And Shane exudes courage. We thank him for his service and continued service. So we honor the service of veterans and show appreciation to veteran families on this day. We salute you all. Let's give all the veterans another special hand of applause. Stand up. Stand up. Let's stand and give them a special standing ovation. At this time, I would ask Mr. Tim Stevens to join me for a special announcement.
Last spring, I was working on a play about Garner in Vietnam, and I interviewed about 35, 40 men from Garner who had gone to Vietnam, talked to the families of the 9 men from Garner who were killed in Vietnam. And time after time, when I talked to the veterans, they told me this is the first time I have ever told anyone about my Vietnam experience. I talked to another man who said, how in the world did you find out I went to Vietnam? I've never told anybody in Garner that I went. And I was talking to one man, and I was told before I went, he will not talk to you about the Vietnam. I called him on the phone. We talked 45 minutes. He called me back. We talked 45 minutes. I went to his house, and he talked to me for an hour and a half. I said, I thought, I was told you would never talk about Vietnam. He says, no one has ever cared to ask. And I think that we do care. And next spring, I'm very pleased to announce that we're going to have the Wall That Heals, which is a 3/4 scale replica of Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington. But we're bringing that to Lake Benson Park, primarily to show these men that we do care. And it's called the Wall That Heals because there is a healing. For when I talk to these men, close to 40 of them, I guess, time and time again, they told me they still had hurts. They would always have hurts. And so many of them would come and say, and no one cares. That's the reason we're bringing the wall. It's going to be here April 16 through 19. It's going to be open 24 hours a day. It's the exact scale replica of the one in Washington, D.C., made out of the same materials. You can go get etchings on it. It's going to be here, and I think it's going to help transform our community and help change lives.
Mr. Stevens, thank you for your efforts and your vision to bring the Wall That Heals back to the town of Garner. We want to certainly thank our special guest today. We thank you, Ms. Parsons, for that special story. We'll all have fond memories of your service and Shane and how he took his life and was able to do many positive things in spite of the tragic circumstances. Guests, I hope you've all been moved. I hope your appreciation for all of America's sons and daughters has been enhanced by the words you heard and the things that you have seen here today. To all our veterans, you hear these words so many times, but I want you to hear it again as I said from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your service.